minutes in front of these drivers and plenty of opportunities.
But yes, a bit of point of contention, but it doesn't matter now, Ron. We're going green.
Drivers are on their way, and it's a rather convincing start from Joyner. He's going to be leading them complicated. Heading through this bend, it tightens up though before they head off into turn number 8. Let's see this is going to be very close.
What is happening?
Based off the fact you sound like you sat on a cold toilet seat there, Adam, but that was insane. And Kramer was mega sideways coming out of turn number 8.
That one got me. That one got me.
Look at this conga line. Dun 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 dun. Who was it that came up for the? Oh, that was Tolo coming in. Well, hello and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Slow Motion Broadcasting, and welcome back to the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors. This is round number 9 of the season, coming to you today from the Sachsenring. My name is Maunz. Alongside me in the commentary booth is Randall McGrew, and in the virtual production hall, we have Guido Marzucchi. We head to one of the newest tracks on iRacing today, a track which, despite being primarily one for motorcycles, is still a brilliant ride in the world of racing. We've got some real unique corners around this track, Randall, and considering it's a first time this series has ever ran around here, I think we're gonna have some fun.
Absolutely. There's another motorcycle circuit on the iRacing service that is exceptionally fun to drive in cars in the form of Barber Motorsports Park. So if it's anything like Barber, then we are in for a very exciting race here today.
I think that's a very apt description, honestly, Randall, because much like Barber, this track here, the Sachsenring, has a crap load of elevation change. It's got some brilliantly long corners to it as well. My only experience driving around here, full transparency, folks, is on race room. So that kind of ages it a little bit, but it's still an absolutely brilliant ride in the world of motorsports. 2.28 miles, 13 turns and all, but these drivers are going to be having some fun here. It's one of the first times we've run in anywhere outside the UK. The Okayama race 1 week ago was the first time we've done so thus far this season. So a lot of British tracks, but this track completely different. It's in Germany, so that completely ages it right there in terms of differences from UK tracks to this one. But Sachsenring, it just has such a unique flow to it.
Absolutely. Lots of really long corners, like you mentioned, lots of elevation changes. There's shades of a few other courses in this track's layout. I noticed some sectors look like Hungaroring ran in reverse, and some other places look a lot like Lebanon. So it's going to be a unique challenge for these drivers. They're going to have plenty of room to race, though, so we should see lots of action.
And action going to be the name of the game. Currently in this qualifying session with the checkered flag out for the past 20 seconds, Edward Buchanan finds himself on the provisional pole as it stands at the moment. Ian Joyner going to join him on the front row as it stands at the moment. Jörg Mani continuing on his claim as being one of the fastest drivers in this series. Right off the back of an overall win 1 week ago to Okayama, he's currently slotted in 5th. But Mani, the Masters man, proving to be the master of the field. He's actually scored the most amount of points out of anyone thus far this season. So if we had an overall championship, Jörg Mani would be contending for that, which as a master driver is a brilliant performance.
Absolutely. The janitor has been cleaning it up all season long with only one race where he didn't win the Masters division. He got 2 overall wins last week in Weekend Warriors, back-to-back on Sunday. So Jörg Mani with a lot of momentum coming into this race.
And lots of drivers up and down this field looking to continue on the momentum that they've built up over the decent chunk of this season that we've already had. Only 4 more races left to go, and that includes this one. After that, only 3 left in the form of Knock Hill, Zolder, and VIR to bring this season to a close. But the Sachsenring going to play host to today's race, and these drivers going to try and learn this track as best as they possibly can. Looking at the weather forecast, I will say it is rather cloudy, overcast skies, and a high ambient temperature of about 65. Track temperatures no better at about 67 degrees Fahrenheit. Not sure exactly how that works out in terms of Celsius, but nevertheless, these drivers have a lot on their plates, and it's going to be fun. Just waiting for this qualifying session to be brought to a conclusion. Some drivers still at their running the clock down, so we'll hopefully be able to get that starting grid in just a couple of moments. I gotta say, in terms of the tracks that we are visiting outside of the UK, only 4. Okayama 1 week ago. It's Sachsenring here today. We got Zolder and VIR to bring the season to a close. And I guess technically speaking, it's a Scottish track, but it is still part of the UK though. So Knock Hill in 1 week's time. I guess some people would maybe count that as being outside the UK. But regardless, before I end up pissing off any British people tuning into this broadcast, I think we'll take a look at the starting grid before I get myself hung out to dry. And for the pole position for this race at the Sachsenring today, it is going to be the Canadian Edward Buchanan in the 5-car, saying a 1-minute 27.649 to grab the pole. Ian Joyner will start alongside in second. Richard Harwood will start in third next to Jason Green, completing that second row. Jörg Monty going to be the Masters pole sitter in fifth, next to Michael McConnell in sixth. Soren Garrett will find himself starting this race in seventh in the number 21 car, next to Tortolo off the back of a win as a Spec 1 driver 1 week ago at Okayama. And then rounding out your top 10, we have the Spec 2 pole man in the form of Chris Montgomery and Mark Smith.
In 11th, Trenton Kramer is starting next to him. Fabian Singer in a 12th position. Then once we get back to 13th place, we have Glenn Wolofsky in the 207 entry starting next to Juan Garcia. 15th, Boris Essman. 16th, Daniel Tufts. Alan DeGasis in P17. Daniel Varon in P18. Jeff Whipker going to start 19th, and Bill Walker will round out your top 20.
And looking through the drivers we have starting outside the top 20, the first of those is Andrew Love starting in 21st in the 544 car. Kevin Adrian going to join him on that 11th row. Russell Taucher will start behind them in P23, next to Jim Brewster in 24th. And then looking through the final few starters we've got in this field, we've got SMB's very own Josh Wilkie starting in 25th, John Thompson, another Canadian, starting in 26th, and Jeff Jacobson going to be the rear gunner of this field in the 240 car, starting this race in 27th. So that's how it looks for the starting grid. I gotta say, for a track which is not part of base content and was only introduced into iRacing, I think 1 or 2 seasons ago, some pretty strong participation here at the Sachsenring.
Yeah, 27 cars is a pretty decent sized grid. Not as big as we're used to seeing in this league, but not far away from it either. There are some notable names missing from the Masters division, and Jörg Manny is going to be starting with a massive advantage in the Masters division. We saw his nearest competition was starting all the way back at 17th place in the form of Alan DeGasis. So Jörg is already in a good position as long as he can keep the car clean. Going to be starting there next to Michael McConnell, around Michael McConnell. And we know Michael McConnell is going to be involved in a race this entire session.
Yeah, he is going to be battling someone throughout every single lap that we have in this 40-minute long race that we have coming up. Have to worry about those pit stops as well, Randall. Didn't really get a good view of it in the qualifying session that we were in a couple of moments ago, but pit entry, on paper, it seems a little bit standard, but when it comes to the Weekend Warriors, nothing is for certain. So I have a feeling that the pit stops going to be just as important, if not even more important, in this race than they have been in weeks past.
Yeah, the pit entry is pretty straightforward here. You just have to hang out hard left coming off the final corner. You'll have a pretty clear run at the pit entry. The pit exit, though, is a lot like we saw at Donington, where it's going to spit you out onto the racing line. Different from Donington, the drivers on track won't necessarily be using the pit exit for opening up the entry to turn 1, but they will be right there. So you have to keep your eyes peeled at on that pit exit. Make sure there's nobody coming out of that when you're coming up to take turn 1. We could see some action form there.
I will try and do an impression of some of these drivers exiting pit lane around this racetrack. Ah! That's the best way I can describe it. Looking back in sheer terror, seeing the field approach in their rearview mirror. That is going to be the name of the game for these drivers. The pit stops always so important here, and not just the Formula Fords, but the Spec Racer Fords that we're going to be seeing later on this afternoon, all of which you can catch exclusively here on SMB. That gives you a reason to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on any of the racing action. Oh, bless you, Randall.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, don't worry, all good. I hack up a lung from time to time. Nothing serious, just like case of emphysema. Ready to get things up and rolling from the 9th race of this season. The green flag is out, and the drivers are on their way, and it's really disorganized. Heading down that start-finish straightaway off into the heavy braking zone of turn number 1, but Edward Buchanan getting off to a flyer. He's going to lead them comfortably, heading off through the downhill, dropping away from your right-hander of turn number 1. Now through the tight twisties, this is turn number 2. You can see the elevation change already affecting some of these drivers, making through very clean. Right as I say that, though, a spinner heading through turn number 2, and a big crash upside down. Holy cow.
Yeah, we saw one car there get sideways coming through that, and it looks like it just compounded itself very quickly. We'll get a replay of that later. Right now, we're going to take a look at this lead race. Edward Buchanan was able to fire off like a cannon and get in front of Ian Joyner. Joyner went on the inside a little defensive into turn one and kind of compromised himself. It's given Buchanan a bit of a breather here. He's got a half-second gap over Joyner right now. So not enough to pull away, but enough to he doesn't really need to worry about pressure on this first lap. You see these cars are now all pretty much single file. There's a big gap back where that incident happened though, and that's going to give a bit of a breakaway here. About 8 cars it looks like.
And there you can see these drivers slowly but surely breaking away in a rather hectic start. That was the worst commentator jinx I think I've ever done. I'm like, oh, heading through the first few corners, they've gotten off to a clean start. And then we have a driver go upside down. I think in the not too far off future, we have to take a look at several replays of that because I think it all started with a spin and that just snowballed from there. Daniel Tufts in the number 34 car, I believe, was a car that ended up on his lid as a result of all that. That's the first time we've seen a flip here in the Formula Fords in quite some time, possibly the first time we've seen it thus far this season. Actually, I will amend that statement outside of some of the end of the race shenanigans where these drivers drive backwards and hit all the jumps they possibly can. We're going to take a look at a replay to see this hecticness at the start. Riding on board with Trent Kramer in the number 20 car, you can see him wheeling it on the inside line through turn number 2, around the outside in 2, and there you go. Contact being made. He was the initial spinner, and look at that. That's Tufts, and oh, that was a weird-looking collision. You can see Josh Wilkie getting a piece of that. Russell Telker, Jeff Jacobson involved in that. Jim Brewster got a piece of that action as well. But Tufts in that number 34 car, he got hit by, I think, 4 or 5 cars and just got popped up into the air like a misshapen Lego.
Yeah, a lot of drivers just reacting to what was happening in front of them and scrambling to try to get free of it. And what happened was that they just started making contact. You see this a lot when drivers try to avoid an incident, that other incidents occur, and the cars were all bunched up real tight. It's kind of hard to avoid. A lot of those drivers didn't have anywhere to go, as it looks like another car having a heavy impact with the wall there coming across the track as we jump back to live pictures. So some people struggling out here early doors.
Yeah, a lot of drivers running into some difficulties. 21 cars out there on the racetrack as it stands at the present moment. Your current retirements seem to be Daniel Tufts and Josh Wilkie. I think Mark Smith is still out there. He's about to exit back onto the racetrack in the 222 car, so he's still out and kicking it. Jeff Wubker, Trent Kramer, and Jeff Jacobson all still in their pit stall as it stands at the present moment. However, that isn't the end to the drama. Let's take a look at this from Jeff Jacobson in the 240 car. He got a small piece of that drama hang off through turn number 2 at the very start of the race, and let's see, this is towards the end of the lap unless I'm very much mistaken. Contact being made, and oh, nearly had another flipper. Oh, that's a big hit.
That is heavy damage to Jeff Jacobson. We caught the tail end of that in a previous replay, that white car coming across the track. So we saw how that developed. Jeff Jacobson not going to be happy with his result today. Going to have a lot of work to do to repair that car.
Yeah, both of those cars pinging off. That was a huge hit that we saw for those racers. So thankfully, they will be able to repair that damage, albeit it is still some hefty repairs that they will have to undergo in those race cars. That was through the turn number 10 and 11 section, if I'm very much mistaken, as I think we had some more drama through there involving Fabian Singer in the 810 car. He just won off the circuit, the Austrian running at this racetrack. Don't have an Austrian track making its appearance thus far this season. Would be cool to see these Formula Ford cars run around the Red Bull Ring, though. But as we look at the front of the field, these drivers starting to battle. Ian Joyner trying to get moved on Edward Buchanan to take the lead of the race in the number 8 car. Got the exiting car of Jeff Jacobson. Hopefully he plays the sportsman role. Yes, he does play the sportsman role. Nicely done there from Jeff Jacobson to get out of the way of the ensuing pack that was encroaching on him rapidly. That scream I did earlier on to imitate the run out of the pits in these race cars around this racetrack, I think is exactly what was going through the mind of Jeff Jacobson a couple of moments ago.
Yes, Jeff Jacobson doing a really good job here trying to kind of keep out of the way while keeping the pace up. He does still have a bit of a race to run. He could get some positions back, but he's definitely not involved in this battle and doesn't want to be the guy inflicting himself upon the lead battle for no reason whatsoever. A bit of a breakaway starting in this lead group of 8. The top 3, Ian Joyner, Edward Buchanan, and Richard Harwood, kind of have a nice little gap built up there, about 1.2 seconds back to Tortullo from 3rd place. So we're seeing a bit of a breakaway within the breakaway, these three drivers are all very, very quick, and if they can keep from fighting each other, they might be able to build a bit more of a gap.
And let's see how these drivers are going to tackle this stage of the race that they find themselves in. After the hecticness at the start, these drivers looking to settle into some sort of groove. The real question is, will they be able to do it in the Spec 2 class, though? We've got a battle for the lead between Fabian Singer and Chris Montgomery. Those two drivers battling for not only the Spec 2 lead, but the final spot inside the top 10. A reminder to anyone who's a newcomer to the Weekend Warriors world, these drivers not classed in terms of their class positions. They are scored by their overall finishing position, so it may be a battle for the Spec 2 win, but these drivers still battling for top 10 points as Chris Montgomery looking to fight back on the inside line of Singer. Contact being made, heading down the start-finish straightaway into the braking zone of turn number 1. Let's look at this. This is very close quarter stuff between these two racers. They were keeping it clean for a while, though, outside that contact, heading down the start-finish straightaway, but it looks like Singer and the A10 car are going to get the move done.
A little bit of a touchy there going down the straightaway. I think maybe they thought the inside car thought the outside car was going to blend over a little bit more, a little bit sooner, and just a lack of communication there. Luckily, no harm done to either driver or their cars, so they'll be able to continue on with that battle as this breakaway at the front is already starting to get bigger. We're now back up to 1.4 seconds back to Tortullo. So in the space of about a lap, a couple tenths already lost. Michael McConnell, Jörg Manny involved in a big fight here. Jörg trying to get around McConnell. We knew McConnell finds himself in a battle every race, all race, it seems like. So this is a very common occurrence for him. He won't be feeling much pressure. He is used to this.
Yeah, this is not a unfamiliar position for really either of these drivers. Jörg Manny, though, trying to get that move done to slip his way up into 6th, down the inside, heading off into the final corner of turn number 13. No one's had bad luck through there yet, keyword being yet. I'm not going to jinx it yet again, but Jörg Manny proving himself to be a very fast driver all throughout this season. Let's look through his record thus far in the Masters category. Won the first race, won the second race, won the third race, won the fourth race, won the fifth race, did not win the sixth, and then won the 7th and 8th. Jörg Manny has been an unstoppable force thus far this season, and in the Masters category, there hasn't been that unmovable object to stop him. The only driver who's gone to win in the Masters class outside of him is Antonio Reis, who's not here in this event.
Yeah, he's one of the notable names missing from the Masters division this week. We'll hopefully see Antonio in the Spec Racer Ford. I suspect that many drivers may not own this track quite yet, and they're just going to use it as one of their drop weeks instead of purchasing a new track. But I think it's their loss if that's true, because this looks like a very exciting track to drive, and we are seeing a really good show here right now. Ian Joyner still leading the way over Edward Buchanan. Harwood having issues hanging on to these two, so a bit of a gap forming there. He's still within slipstream range, but he's really going to have to get his visor down and on the button if he's going to catch back up to those leaders that have a chance to fight for the overall win. So we jump back to look here at Chris Montgomery and Fabian Singer. We saw these two battling earlier, like a lap ago on the front straightaway at the tail end of the previous lap and going into the next lap. So this fight not completely over yet. Chris Montgomery looks to be biding his time right now, maybe doing a bit of fuel saving and to try to get him on the pit stop. You see Tortullo, he's got a big gap. That gap ahead to Harwood is now 2.5 seconds. So he's fallen off pretty quickly. So we're seeing a lot of spread through this field. The cream kind of rising to the top. And right now, Ian Joyner looks to be driving away with it.
Yeah, Ian Joyner, I mean, he's just putting in a performance that we've seen from him all season long. Joyner has been, at times for his competitors, frustratingly quick this season here in the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors. I remember kicking off this season for the broadcast at Silverstone for round number 1, talking about if anyone was going to challenge James Berry, who entered this season as a 2-time reigning champion here from the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors. James hasn't showed up at all this season, and Ian Joyner, who was the main rival to James Berry, those two Brits were battling tooth and nail, hammer and tong all throughout their past 2 seasons as competitors here in the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors. But ever since Berry disappeared, for lack of a better term, Joyner has been in the catbird seat to replicate the DJ Khaled song, and just all he has done thus far this season is win, 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 no matter what. As we see drivers going side by side a little bit farther in the back, that's Daniel Verone, Bill Walker, and Andrew Love battling really hard. This heading down into turn number 12 right now, the second to last corner. A good overtaking opportunity, but you need to get it done with authority through that medium speed corner. Certainly not a good run through there for Andrew Love, as he just ran wide, dipped a couple wheels off into the gravel, as we still see this hornet's nest forming, as Bill Walker going to pull out of that hornet's nest and come into the pits.
Yeah, 10.5 minutes into this race, not exactly too early to pit. So Bill Walker really going to be the first one to come in for service. We'll see how long he stopped and maybe use that as a benchmark for everybody else. Right now, Ian Joyner with a 0.3 of a second gap over Buchanan. We've seen this gap here, if you've been watching the time screen, kind of inflate then deflate, and I think what's going on here is that Joyner seems to be faster in the higher speed sections and slower in the lower speed sections. And if I'm going to set up my car, that's exactly how I'd want to be too. Faster in the high speed sections, because you're going to be impossible to pass. Even if somebody's faster than you in the slow speed sections, they're going to have a lot of trouble getting around you.
And that's the thing when it comes to a racetrack like this. I mentioned in my open how this track is primarily used by motorcycles. Because of that, you don't have a lot of heavy braking opportunities in race cars with 4 wheels instead of race bikes with 2. So outside of turn number 1, maybe turn number 13 that we're seeing the leaders go through right now, and I'm trying to think if there's any other real viable overtaking opportunities for these racers. I really don't think there are many outside turn 1, turn 12, and turn 13. So just having a defensive drive and setting your car up to be hard to overtake into those heavy braking zones, I gotta say, I'm absolutely with you there, Randall. Having a setup where you can maximize your speed gotta be a game changer for some of these drivers.
Jason Green and Tortulo involved in a heavy battle here. We're going to see Jason Green look to the inside coming up to turn 1. He's going to have a really good run here. He's got a lot of momentum. He's going to be clear before they get to the turn-in point. He's going to open up that entry a bit. Doesn't completely cover off Tulo there, so leaves plenty of racing room, and is going to have that move completely done by the time they get to the corner. And new position 4 driver is Jason Green.
So well done from Green and Tolo. To those who tune into the Saturday Formula V Weekend Warriors every single weekend here on SMB, those two battling for a championship over there, a championship battle, which is certainly going to be close on the kind of the fact that Jason Green imposed his own race ban onto himself for this past weekend's race at Alton Park. That, or he just didn't want to deal with the rain. Either way, he joined us in the commentary booth for that, and I feel bad for him. I think I had to give him about 5 bottles of Excedrin to deal with the migraine after spending an hour and a half in a commentary booth with me, as we take a look at some side-by-side racing a little bit farther in the back. This is between Juan Garcia and Chris Montgomery. Fabian Singer in that 810 car. He's actually broken away a little bit from his Spec 2 rival. So Singer, he's yet to grab a win thus far this season in the Spec 2 category, and I would be lying if I said that I recognize him from a previous race thus far this season. So Singer, in what may end up being his season debut here from the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors, looking to kick off his time in this series this season with a bang.
Yeah, you can see Chris Montgomery now has battling with Juan Garcia. Juan Garcia was ahead of this pair, so Juan is struggling for pace right now, where Fabian and Chris seem to have really figured it out. So Chris is going to be trying to work his way around Juan Garcia as quickly as possible so he can keep in contact with Fabian. And we see that gap is already starting to open up there for Fabian. Right now, though, I'm looking at Richard Harwood. That gap got up to nearly a second, as we're going to ride on board with Jörg Manny as he tries to track down Tortello. But Richard Harwood has the fastest lap of the session right now with a 1:28.105. That gap got up to nearly a second, and he was able to claw back a couple tenths on the main straightaway. That gap keeps getting bigger and then smaller, but as it oscillates, it keeps getting bigger and bigger, and he's going to be coming under threat of losing the slipstream, so he needs to have a few clean laps here where he doesn't make many mistakes. But it looks like Buchanan maybe had a mistake, because he's really fell back now. He's nearly half a second or more behind Joyner. Luckily, that slipstream is going to bring them back together, but it's going to leave Richard Harwood knocking on his back door.
Yeah, so we may end up having a fight between those two drivers, Richard Harwood and Edward Buchanan, two drivers who have yet to grab a victory thus far this season here in the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors, but occasionally when they have shown up, they have shown up in a fantastic way, certainly proving that here at the Sachsenring tonight, slot in P2 and P3 as it stands at the present moment, and still within striking distance of Ian Joyner. This is a rather odd performance for Joyner on the count of the fact that throughout the season he has had some mightily dominant drives. He's already got, I believe, just doing the quick math in my head, I believe he has 5 wins thus far this season. So Joyner certainly proving himself to be the main rival to a lot of these drivers, but this is probably the least dominating performance he's had thus far this season. Those two drivers are still within striking distance, so Joyner needs to keep it clean. Absolutely.
This is a very high-speed track for these cars, so not a huge surprise that we're seeing a lot of slipstream here out of these cars. That's being the main reason why Joyner hasn't been able to break away. You do need to be quite a bit faster than the other drivers behind you in order to break away. Otherwise, some of these bigger straights will really bring the cars back together because of slipstream. And even in some of the medium speed corners, the slipstream will play a big effect through those corners. So as you come up to the entry and as you get back on throttle, you'll be able to get some benefit from that car ahead. And we see that gap every time they come down the front straightaway just shrink right back up, as it looks like maybe got a battle here going on. And then it's like the 544, and I can't see the number of the other car, but we got the blue car on the inside going to be making a very, very late lunge. Doesn't quite get the move done before they get to the corner, so they enter side by side, and he has the preferred line on the inside, but then immediately gives it back to the 544, who is going to finish and keep that position. But then a big slide there going through turns 3 and 4, it looks like. But Andrew Love able to defend that position by taking the outside line into turn 1.
That, I believe, was Love and John Toms who are battling heading off through the first sector. So Toms in that 977 car, unable to hold off Andrew Love as Love finds himself in 15th, Toms in 16th. John Toms, I will say, holding on to this as it stands currently with himself and Kevin Adrian, those two, the hard chargers as it stands at the present moment, both up 10 spots. So a lot of drivers cutting their way through the field like a hot knife through butter. Tolo has been one of them. He's running 4th, up 4 spots from where he started in this race in the number 27 car, and he's currently leading a pack of 4 cars, so lots of 4s in the span of a couple of moments there for Tolo. But let's see if he'll be able to hold off the challenge. It's a big gap between himself and Richard Harwood, so I'm not sure if he'll be able to break his way out into the podium spots, but Tolo certainly a really good contender and towards the front of this field, as you can see the move that he put on Jason Green to slip his way up into 4th.
Yeah, he got a big run down the straightaway. I think Jason Green kind of let it happen and backed off a bit early into turn 1. Didn't want to fight with him too much because they are losing time so quickly to the lead trio right now. That gap is at 6.2 seconds. So they have a lot of ground to try to make up. I don't know that they're going to have the pace to do it without something big happening up front. But if something happens with this trio, and speaking of something happening with this trio, Edward Buchanan now in the lead. We're going to see this move as they come down the front straightaway. He's able to close that gap up and then moves to the inside of Ian Joyner. Going to easily get this move done. Looks like Joyner kind of saw it coming. Similar to Jason Green, kind of backs off just a little bit and say, oh, hey, go ahead. We don't want to fight here too much. Maybe doing a little bit of fuel saving since he's been leading most of the way. And gonna, slip into second here into that slipstream behind Buchanan. Maybe save a few splashes of fuel and have a faster pit stop as we jump back to 4th position. The battle is still on. It looks like Jörg Manny looking very eager for the 2nd lap in a row to get around to Jason Green. He's looked to the inside a few times, not been able to get anything done. But Green gonna be feeling the pressure as he runs a little bit wide and gonna give Manny a big boost and get really close to him. So we're going to have a big slipstream here. I wouldn't be shocked if these guys go 3 wide into turn 1.
Yeah, I would not be surprised at all. They certainly are side by side with Green and Tolo heading off into turn number 1. Look at that, Jörg Manny trying to dispatch of Tolo a couple of moments after trying to dispatch of Jason Green. Green ran wide coming out of turn number 12. I think he should be counting his lucky stars. The fact he was able to make up some spots at the end of the day. Manny was as well. McConnell still holding steady in 7th as it stands at the present moment. But the game of leapfrog certainly continuing involving these drivers all throughout the grid. Some battling battling going on involving Alan DeGassis and John Toms a little bit farther in the back. Those two battling for P16, P17 as it stands at the present moment. The drivers at the front of the field, though, giving us a really good battle to talk about. Edward Buchanan, Ian Joyner, and Richard Harwood covered by nothing, as Fabian Singer may have had some sort of off-track excursion in the 810.
He absolutely has. Something happened with him. We saw him quickly drop down the order, and that's what it was. He ran off. I wonder if he had a little bit of help getting over there and then is having some issues trying to get it going back in the correct direction. We're going to see one more look at this. Is that Chris Montgomery? He's been fighting with all race, has got that position away from him, and then a little bit of contact. And I really hate to point this out on a broadcast, but that looked like a healthy dose of what we like to call net code.
Yeah, I think that was definitely a little bit of netcode related chicanery involved in all that. That was heading down the hill off it to turn number 3, and Fabian Singer nearly just left the track entirely. But either way, tough stuff for Singer. Maybe a little bit of suspension damage on that race car as well. But thankfully, he was able to rejoin the race after some loop-de-loos, to invoke some beautiful professional terminology. The best of the best here on SMP, as we're now over the halfway mark of this 40-minute long race. It's Edward Buchanan, our pole sitter, leading as Ian Joyner slot in P2. Richard Harwood running at your podium spots as it stands presently in 3rd. York Monty is your current Masters leader, and Chris Montgomery leading it in the Spec 2 class. Chris Montgomery, a driver who is a Weekend Warriors staple. He's done well in the Formula Vs. He's done well in the Formula Fords. However, Montgomery only has 2 wins thus far this season. Those coming at Thruxton and Donington Park a couple of weeks ago, nearly a month ago at this point in the case of Thruxton. So Montgomery looking to return to victory lane, and as it stands currently has a significant gap between himself and the 13th place runner of Daniel Verone. So Montgomery, I'm not going to say it's his yet, but he's probably feeling a bit confident in his chances.
Andrew Love in the pit lane. He's now on his way out. He was stopped for 17.8 seconds. Bill Walker was the first driver to come in. He was stopped for 16.4. So I wouldn't be shocked to see these leaders stop for 14 to 15 seconds once they decide to come in. Right now, though, Jörg Manny's still showing the nose there to Jason Green. Not really going for a move, but keeping that pressure dialed up. Chris Montgomery, right now, your Spec 2 leader, as we mentioned after that incident. Not really anything to blame on Chris Montgomery there. He had that position pretty well in hand. Edward Buchanan continues to lead the way overall over Ian Joyner, and we see that gap back to Richard Harwood opening back up again. So Harwood's going to have to continue to run mistake-free laps to keep this gap closed. It looks like he's got the pace to hang on, but he probably doesn't have the pace to challenge either of these drivers. And of course, Ian Joyner looks to be playing the long game right now, not super interested in getting back that lead position from Buchanan.
And as you can see, these drivers heading through the very fast middle sector of this track here at the Sachsenring. This is under the bridge into turn number 8 right now. You can see these drivers looking the stamp and sending it through these very fast corners in these old school race cars, which don't have a pound of downforce on them. These drivers having to muscle their race cars around this section of the racetrack. They're essentially flat out from the exit of turn number 6 all the way down the hill into turn number 12. So that is a decent chunk of this lap that is spent flat out. The Sachsenring, a really interesting track in the world of racing. Really happy that's a part of this season's schedule, and you can see the rather fascinating layout that the circuit has. And Randall, you want to indulge me real quick? I want to ask you this, a little bit of Sachsenring trivia. When do you think this track opened?
Ooh, that is a good question. 1962.
It was actually 1927, strangely enough. This track has been around for a while, and the original layout of the Sachsenring was in use from 1927 all the way up until 1989. Thank you very much to RacingCircuits.info, the website where most of my middle school and early high school years went to die. Thank you very much, RacingCircuits.info, for that fantastic information. Hey, if you're tuning into this broadcast, how about you throw us a couple of bucks here at SMB, and we'll always use your statistics on these shows. But that was about as slick as 80 grit sandpaper. Let's get back on track and talk about the racing here, Randall.
Jörg Manny with a big move over Jason Green gets that P5 or P4 away from Jason Green, and Jason Green nearly gave up another spot to Tortello. So the pressure finally worked. Jörg Manny able to get that spot and is going to try to track down this top 3. He's got a big gap ahead of him, but he does seem to have a lot of pace. So maybe he's the right car to lead that pack. As we see Michael McConnell and Soren Gerrits, these two are like perpetual dance partners. These two always seem to find each other on track regardless of the cars that they're in, and they have found each other once again as Tortello is all over the rear of Jason Green trying to get a move done. He might have his best shot coming up here on the front straightaway. Jason Green might consider coming into the pits. Nope, none of them are going to come into the pits, and Tortello is going to be on the attack. Watch for the inside move as they approach turn 1, and there he's starting to show the nose, and no, it doesn't have the run, so he's going to back out of it, maybe doing a bit of fuel saving. But in the interim, Jörg Manny's opened up a 0.6 of a second gap over Jason Green, so they need to get a move on, or Jörg's going to drive away.
These pit stops are certainly going on as Soren Garrett and Chris Montgomery making that call to come in. Montgomery, the Spec 2 leader. Let's see if any other of the drivers in the Spec 2 class are going to be shadowing his call. He may actually be shadowing the call that was made by Daniel Verona a couple of moments ago, as a driver currently slotted in P18 made that decision to come into the pits a couple of laps ago. So let's see if this slow trickle of drivers coming down pit lane is going to continue at the rate that it is right now, or whether it's going to transform into a full-on monsoon. I should have saved that comment for Okayama last week.
Well, we see Soren Garrett out of the pits with a 15.4 stop time. Chris Montgomery now out of the pits with a 16.6. Whenever we saw Daniel Varyn come in, who's now showing us a lap down, he was stopped for nearly 20 seconds. So that's going to increase that gap there. As Edward Buchanan's dealing with some lap traffic in the form of Glenn Wolowski, he says, no, thank you, sir. He's going to dip into the pit lane. Leader's coming into the pit lane, and he's the only one of this trio in the pit lane. So we'll keep an eye on his stop time and where he eventually comes out. And then once the rest of the leaders come in, we could have a race on our hands here at this pit exit. Though it looks like coming in, rejoining the track from the pit exit puts you at a significant disadvantage. So maybe the right move done here by Buchanan, as Ian Joyner is going to re-inherit this lead and have to deal with this lap traffic. Glenn Wolowski in front of him. Hopefully they're able to make it around Glenn without losing too much time.
I'm going to document this right now. The last time by, Ian Joyner set a 128.591. That was his lap time last time by. We may not get an entirely representative lap time, because I have a feeling that Ian Joyner is probably going to shadow the call made by this man. Edward Buchanan is going to be exiting out, not in 10th. Actually, no, he will be in 10th. I thought that was a car of Jim Brewster coming up. That was the anticlimax to end all anticlimaxes, but Edward Buchanan still finding himself just barely inside the top 10. Ian Joyner and Richard Harwood, though, having to deal with this traffic of Wolowski, and you can see Wolowski trying his best to get out of the way and not hold these drivers up, but it's so difficult to pass around this track that you have to lick the stamp and send it, even if your competitor is getting out of the way. Look at that, both those racers sideways, slideways, heading through turn number 12. Joyner still leading this race over Harwood as it stands at the moment. Are these drivers going to come into the pits? Wolowski will. Joyner and Harwood won't, though, and that is going to give us the opportunity to see the lap time fall off. Well, is it a 128.5 one lap ago for Ian Joyner? He just set a 129.0, so clearly it didn't seem like much, but that lap traffic encounter definitely held up Ian Joyner. I'm curious what sort of situation Edward Buchanan finds himself in terms of getting held up.
Absolutely. It's going to put a pit delta of about 42 seconds, as we're going to see a replay here of Soren Garrett's after he's come out of the pits. So that car a little bit extra heavy with fuel compared to when he came in. And we're going to see exactly what goes wrong for him here. It looks like he runs a little bit wide there, gets off into the marbles, and the rear end just starts to step out on him. He's able to save the car, loses a little bit of time. So that is definitely going to have an impact on his race with McConnell, but not a whole lot of time lost. So if McConnell gets stuck in traffic, maybe he'll have a chance, as we see Jason Green and Tortello dealing with each other right now. Ahead of them, Jörg Manny, who is right behind the lap down entry of the Spec 2 entry, of Daniel Varyn, who's second place in Spec 2 before the pit cycle started. So Daniel came out and is now a lap down, and he's having to play traffic management here as well, trying to do his best to get out of the way. And we saw this out of Glenn Wolowski as well, trying to get out of the way. And there's a saying I like to tell my drivers in my leagues. Whenever you try to get out of the way, often you end up getting in the way. And that's kind of what we saw out of Wolowski, as Ian Joyner's going to come into the pit lane and Richard Harwood's going to inherit the lead. He's not going to come in. So Harwood maybe making a bold strategy call here to stay out. He's not going to have the benefit of any slipstream for this lap while he while he circulates, but it looks like he's managed to save a lot of fuel because Jörg Manny, Jason Green, and Tortello are all in as well.
Yeah, so these drivers deciding that now is the right time to pit. They do have to come into the pits. That is a necessity for these drivers. That's not an, oh, they probably want to. No, they have to in this series. Harwood, though, staying out yet again. I'm not sure how this is going to work for these drivers, and I'm curious how it's going to shake out with Ian Joyner and Edward Buchanan. Buchanan just setting his personal best lap of the race last time by a 127.8, but in all of that, he did not close up that gap to Ian Joyner. In fact, Ian Joyner was able to pull up that gap significantly between those two. It's now about 4 seconds between Ian Joyner and Edward Buchanan. I was thinking that Buchanan had actually timed this out rather well because he didn't find himself dealing with a lot of traffic and a lot of battling for position, but I guess he could play us like a fiddle as he's now 3.5 seconds back of Joyner. Let's see how Harwood manages this pit stop. I think Harwood, let's see how things work out for him. I'm going to take a look to see what sort of times these drivers spent down into the pits. These drivers are spending around 40 seconds. Harwood may be golden here.
Yeah, Edward Buchanan his stop time was about 3.5 seconds longer, and that's the gap that you saw. So it came down strictly to how long you were stopped in the pit lane. So Joyner able to save some fuel and take less fuel compared to Buchanan, it would seem, as Harwood jumps into the pit lane. We'll see where he shakes out. He's been in third place of that battle the entire time, so he's potentially saved the most fuel out of any of them. We'll see if it reflects in the pit stop time. Right now, sitting just cresting past 10 seconds. We'll see when he gets rolling and keep an eye on where he rejoins the track. Joyner going to have the advantage of speed and the inside line when it comes to pit exit, but it looks like Harwood's stop was 18 seconds, so that's not going to help him. That's going to put him back in the clutches of Edward Buchanan as we see Ian Joyner go past him.
And I have no idea why it was that long for Richard Harwood. You'd think, okay, yeah, coming into the pits with less than 10 minutes left to go, we're coming up to the final 8 minutes here, and he's out and away and exited out behind Ian Joyner. Oh, that's either Ian Joyner short-filled his car or what? Because looking at the pit stop time, Ian Joyner spent about 15 seconds down in his pit stall. Not too bad. It's quicker than Buchanan, and it's somehow quicker than Harwood. That I'm not really sure what to make of that, honestly, Randall. You'd think, okay, yeah, coming into the pits, the last of those drivers, he would spend the least amount of time in the pits. I'm not sure if Ian Joyner short-filled his car or Richard Harwood just messed this up entirely, but I'm a little bit dumbfounded, honestly.
So the way that it works in the sim is you add fuel in 1 gallon increments, though you can cut off the refuel at any point. Some drivers are comfortable doing that cutoff and getting the minimal amount of fuel into it. Other drivers not as comfortable and will put that whole extra gallon in, regardless if they need the entire gallon or not. We see Jörg Manny, Tortello, Jason Green back together after the pit strategy. Looks like Jörg Manny was the loser in pit strategy here, is now in third out of this group. Going to have to do some work to get his way back around Tello and Green. But some drivers more apt to game the system and cut that fuel refill off as soon as they know they have how much fuel they have is enough. Other drivers not as good at fuel calculations, so some of this is prep work, and Ian Joyner is always one of those drivers that knows exactly how much fuel he needs. And not only that, he seems to be exceptional at saving fuel even when he's not in a real fuel saving situation.
Yeah, that's a very good point to raise there, Randall. Ian Joyner, of course, very experienced, already has 5 wins thus far this season. He's won more than half the races that we have, and it's stuff like that which is part of the reason why he's been an indomitable force all throughout this season. As my tongue gets wrapped around my teeth about 15 times, let's take a look at this off-track moment for Andrew Love. That's heading through turn number 12. He didn't even lose out on a spot at all of that. Granted, he probably picked up about 15 pounds of gravel in his radiator, but nevertheless, Pretty quick off-track moment heading through turn number 12, which seems to be the trouble spot here in this race.
We see Ian Joyner with a commanding 1.9 second lead over Richard Harwood, who's under pressure from Edward Buchanan. We know that Buchanan has seemed to be the faster of these two the entire race. So Buchanan has about 5.5 minutes left to get this move done, so plenty of time to get second, but he needs to get it done now if he wants to have any hope of catching up to Joyner, who's driving off into the sunset right now with this race. Buchanan had to back out a little bit there. He was a little too close going into the final corner, and that's going to kill his run out of the corner. It's going to give Harwood a good chance to defend. Buchanan not looking very interested in going for the move quite yet. Backs off just a little bit going into T1, hoping that maybe just the pressure will make Harwood flinch a little bit going through turn 1. Doesn't happen, so he'll live to fight another day, but Buchanan all over the rear of Harwood right now.
This battle is looking funky at the present moment with only 5 minutes left to go on the clock, but only time will tell whether it's going to be funky in the Earth, Wind, and Fire way or funky in the Blue Cheese way. Let's see how these drivers manage the end of this race. Yorkmani and Tortolo were also battling a couple of moments ago. Those two battling for the final spot in the overall top 5 as it stands at the moment. Yorkmani, your Masters leader, currently holding on to that, and in the pit stops, Chris Montgomery has been able to shake out with the Spec 2 lead. But as we take a look at this battle for the final spot on the overall podium, Harwood and Buchanan, I don't think they could give a rat's ass about catching up to Ian Joyner. They're mainly focused on battling each other, and let's see, look at that. Harwood maybe running a little bit wide out of turn number 11. There's a shot that Buchanan needs around the outside into turn number 12, and Harwood's gonna let him by.
Absolutely, Buchanan had a huge run out of turn 12 and managed to translate it to a pass before they even got to the next corner. So they look like out of turn 11 and managed to get it done before they got to turn 12. And by the time they got to 13, he was well clear. Now he's going to set his sights on Ian Joyner, who's 2.1 seconds away. Not unattainable, but definitely going to be a challenge as we see the second podium here. Jason Green leading the way. He's made his way around Tortello. Let me talk about Tortello for a second here. He stopped for 13.9 seconds, which is more than a second faster than everybody else. So maybe earmark Tortello for the Thompson Trophy for fuel management. We're going to see the move here. It looks like Tor goes for the move on Jason Green and gets pretty well alongside coming to the last corner, but it absolutely kills his run off the corner. That's going to give Jörg Manny a nice dose of slipstream, both from him and from Jason Green, able to make his way around Tortello there. Jason Green able to retain the spot as leading out of that trio. Jörg Manny moves up to second place and now going to set his sights on Jason Green. As they look at this battle, they were close coming through turn 1, but Jörg able to get it done.
And I gotta say one thing as well, and there's been a general thing that I've noticed involving Tortello all throughout this race. He's been rather slow on the straight, so I'm not sure whether that 27 car has gasoline in the tank or milk, but either way, that car currently running in 6th as it stands at the present moment has a very capable driver behind the wheel. Tortello, a real-life driver who has experience in a lot of different machinery. He's certainly gonna try and battle hard, but you've got two drivers in front of him who certainly have been around the block in the Weekend Warriors world. As we take a look at the battling at the front of the field, it's rather cooled off with Buchanan and Harwood, but here we go. The battle behind them is hot, involving Jason Green, Uruk-Mani, and Tortello. Here we go, side by side, heading into the braking zone of turn number 1. Mani trying to sweep around the outside. That is close quarter stuff between the two of them, heading down the hill off into turn number 2 right now. This long, never-ending left-hander into the long, never-ending right-hander. These drivers' tires are getting assaulted right at the end of this race. We only got 2 minutes left to go, but Uruk-Mani is here to fight, and that was some brilliant stuff through the first sector to get that move done to slip his way up into 4th.
They'll be coming to take the white flag this time by. As we were watching this battle, though, I looked at my timing sheet and noticed Edward Buchanan set the fastest lap of the race last lap with a 27.5. That was 4.5 tenths faster than Ian Joyner. So that gap closed down to 1.7 seconds. If Joyner finds himself in trouble, this Jörg Manny has a little bit of trouble there, and he's going to give up one spot, possibly two. Jason Green going to take that spot back. Tortello going to take his spot back. So Jörg throws away 4 or 5 laps worth of work here in one corner. Now he's got to get that nose down and try to get those spots back, and he doesn't have a lot of time because they're going to be taking the white flag this time by.
And the white flag is in the air for the drivers all throughout this race, and for Ian Joyner, he finds that white flag with a 1.5 second lead to the back of Edward Buchanan's race car. Buchanan, though, is fast. If this race was an hour long, I feel like we would have to talk about a battle between those two for the win, but Ian Joyner, he just needs to have a clean end to this race. I think that's Gary Wolowski, the lapped car, currently running in 18th, that they may have to dispatch of between now and the checkered flag. But as all this has been going on, Jason Jason Green and Tortello are battling heading off through the first sector right now. Those two giving us one heck of a battle to talk about in fourth. There we go. And look at that, Jörg Mani still within striking distance despite that near off-track moment he had heading through the mid-sector 1 lap ago. Mani still within striking distance, and that Masters driver has been the master thus far this season, and let's see if he'll be able to get a move done on either of these two drivers. This is going to be a heads-up fight in the Spec 2 category. It's not a heads-up fight with Chris Montgomery. He's on track for a win unless he gets struck by a falling anvil in the last lap of this race. But there we go. At the front of the field, Ian Joyner not dropping back into the crutches of Edward Buchanan. However, Richard Harwood has kept tabs with the Canadian in that number 5 car. So that's been a really heads-up fight to talk about involving those two drivers. But I don't think we're going to have a swap-a-roo in positions between now and the end of this race, which is coming up in only a few seconds time for Ian Joyner to grab his 6th win of the season. But as we see him cross the line, the battling right behind with Tolo, Green, and Monty is going to be close right towards the end of this race. Buchanan and Harwood going to round out your podium. But here we go, hang down that start-finish straight away for the final time. Tolo was able to grab P4. Jason Green finished in 5th. Jörg Monty in 6th. And I got to say, I think Tortolo is very happy the fact that the double berries resulted in that start-finish line being a little bit farther towards the back of that start-finish straightaway. If that was about 500 or 1,000 feet farther up the road, Tolo would have been a sitting duck.
Absolutely. Finishes in 4th place where he spent most of the race before the pit cycle. So despite having possibly some issues with straight line speed, was able to get those spots back and fight his way back up to 4th place. Ian Joyner, though, with a 1.7 second margin of victory, takes home the checkered flag and the trophy here today for the overall win. An impressive drive out of him. It's impressive anytime he's in the car to watch him drive, and just putting on another clinic this week here at Sachsenring.
Yeah, Ian Joyner certainly proving himself to be the force to contend with in the championship here this season. That is his 6th win in 9 races, and Joyner going to be entering the final 3, the championship favorites in the Spec 1 category. Chris Montgomery ends up taking his 3rd win as a Spec 2 driver thus far this season. Oh boy, congratulations to him. Man, my tongue seeming to have an affinity for falling out of my mouth on this broadcast. But Chris Montgomery, well done to him, and also well done to Jörg Monty for grabbing yet another win this season. That is going to be his 8th this season. So Jörg Monty, I mean, we talk about Ian Joyner being the force to reckon with in the Spec 1 class. Jörg Monty basically has the Masters Championship sealed, considering the fact that Antonio Reese didn't show up today. So he's out there just hunting for the best spot that he possibly can. As we see, oh my God, they're choosing the runoff area of turn number 8 as their spot of chicanery. And here, look at that. They're coming in like a bunch of anti-craft missiles. Holy cow.
We see this every week out of these guys. They like to have fun after the race. They race serious, and then they turn off the seriousness as soon as the checkered flag flies and have a little bit of fun. Tortello, I'm really shocked out of him. He had the quickest pit stop out of anybody by quite a margin, and he had plenty of fuel to do this after the race. So everybody else may be wondering, possibly preparing for a 28th lap. But it never really seemed like there was going to be a 28th lap, so not sure what's going on with the fuel strategy amongst these drivers. Tortello was the one that got the most right, and it ended up paying off for him.
And a lot of drivers expertly negotiating this race and expertly negotiating their runoff into turn number 8. That was... Seeing those cars come in, barreling into our camera shot like a bat out of hell is always so unbelievably funny to me. Maybe my sense of humor is just completely broken or what, but that's just such a goofy sight every single time I see it. But I think with all that squared away, let's take a look at the results at the end of this race at the Sachsenring today. And for the 6th time here for Season 1 of 2025, it is the Brit of Ian Joyner grabbing the checkered flag as your race winner here at the Sachsenring. It was a well-composed drive from him all throughout the race. Not his most dominant win, but considering that we only have 3 more races left to go, that may end up being the result that just about seals it for him. If he doesn't put a foot wrong in the final 3 races, we'll probably be able to talk about Ian Joyner as the 2025 Season 1 champion here from the Formula Fords. Edward Buchanan, though, put up a really good fight. The Canadian in the number 5 car ends up 1.7 seconds back in second. Richard Harwood going to round out your podium in third. We have Tortolo finishing right behind in fourth. Jason Green will round out your overall top 5. York Motti going to be your winner in the Masters category, finishing 6th, with Soren Garrett right behind in 7th. Michael McConnell will finish in 8th. Kevin Adrian will finish at 9th, with Chris Montgomery, your Spec 2 winner, rounding out your overall top 10.
Juan Garcia, who we saw involved in a couple battles today, finishes a P11 in front of Andrew Love in 12th. Bill Walker comes home in 13th, with Alan DeGasis finishing P2 in the Masters division in 14th position overall. John Toms knocking on his door in 15th place, with Jim Brewster a minute back from the overall leader in 16th. Daniel Varon 17th position. Glenn Wolowski, who we saw involved as a lap down car for a part of this race, going to finish in 18th position. 19th position is going to go to Jeff Jacobson, who had that heavy impact in the opening laps. Manages to come back 1 lap down in a 19th position. Jeff Whipkirk going to round out the top 20.
And looking through the final drivers that we have classified in this race, Mark Smith was the last of the drivers who even got close to the checkered flag. Fabian Singer, who we saw involved in an incident, hang through turn number 2 and 3 a little bit earlier on into the race. He, at one point, was your Spec 2 leader. He ends up finishing down in P22, 14 laps down. Boris Espin also did not take the finish of this race, along with Russell Telker, Trent Kramer, Daniel Tufts, and Josh Wilkie, rounding out the 27 cars are classified at the end of this race. But Randall, we got some drivers waiting in the interview waiting area. I'll let you take first dibs.
I have managed to track down the overall winner, Ian Joyner. Ian, not your typical Sunday race for you here. We normally see you a bit more dominating. You had some competition today, though. Tell us what it was like out there for you.
Yeah, it was warm and lots of corners. Ed was really fast. I don't know whether, I think he's trying to get into the interview area, so maybe you'll get to chat to him later on. And Richard was with us all the way as well. Yeah, we didn't race that hard, so even though we were together, it maybe wasn't the most exciting race. And then ultimately, I guess I probably took a litre less fuel than him or something. Came out the pits a little bit in front. He was really fast at the end, but there's just too much of a gap, so that was that. It flew by really, but it's a strange track. It's very, very, very hard on the tyres. You're just kind of constantly in a corner. But yeah, it went okay. Didn't really see many of the cars, to be honest, the whole time.
So we noticed that you seem to be faster in the high speed sections and a bit slower in the slow speed sections. Did you make any unique setup changes to the car for this track, or did you just kind of run what you brung?
Nothing very different. I know I've come before. Ed does a tutorial and shares his setup. So I'm quite different to. I think I'm quite different to the way he drives in general, really. But his pace was obviously really good. I think he seems to be good as well at the end. Maybe when the tyres have heated up a little bit. So I didn't really do anything special. I did go a little bit hard on the front just because I'm chasing the rear a lot. Second to last corner, nearly went into Ed a couple of times. Didn't even plan to overtake him on. I think whether it was the second or third lap. I just seemed to take a much tighter, faster entry to that, even though our lap time ended up about the same. So that was a little strange at first. We were just really different there. But to be honest, after that, it wasn't really that much racing. Would have been fun. Would have been more fun for us to finish together. Seen how it had gone if we'd been really trying. But yeah.
Well, not an unfamiliar place here for you on the top step of the podium. Before we let you go celebrate yet another win, is there anybody you'd like to thank or shout out?
Yeah, they did league. I think again, it's just been fun. I honestly feel, if it sounded, I feel a bit tired. It was quite a tough one, but yeah, just thanks to everyone. Thanks for broadcasting. I think my wife's actually watching this one unusually, so hello to her. Yeah, thanks all.
Well, congratulations once again, and maybe you'll let somebody else win for a change, Ian, and we'll get to talk to somebody else over the rest of the season.
We'll see. A few races to go. Thanks, guys.
All right, congratulations. That was your overall winner, Ian Joyner. And normally I like to ask what the drivers are looking forward to in the next race. And I think we already know what Ian Joyner looks forward to in the next race, winning yet again.
I was going to say spraying champagne, so that's. I think we both went down the same alleyway there, Randall. But also that suggestion to him of letting some other drivers win. Overall, I would have to say his thoughts on that are probably no shot. Anyways, we're going to be bringing in our Spec 2 winner, Chris Montgomery, into the commentary booth and having a chat with him. Chris, welcome into the commentary booth and congratulations on your class win here at the Sachsenring today. Talk us through this race.
Hey guys, yeah, that was actually a really fun track, and I was just glad to see it dry for once. I've been doing a lot of rain in these races. It's very high speed, and you really don't have much room for error. It's, you got that technical section, and then you really get going at really good speed. And some of those corners, when you're at speed, I mean, if you touch the curb a little bit, it upsets the car enough that you're going to lose it, which I found out repeatedly when we were practicing. But yeah, kind of put it together and had a good run. The start, I haven't seen it yet, but I thought we were going, and then everything kind of checked up, and when that happened, I had a bunch of cars pass me, so I had to start digging and try and get it back. Had a really good race for the first half with Fabian, I believe, and he got by me, and I was just trying to run him down the whole time, and then we kind of went into that technical section. I went back and watched it. It actually looked like a little bit of net code. He was just on the outside of me, and all of a sudden bounced off. I didn't even feel it. And then he was gone, which was unfortunate because we were having a good race. But yeah, I was very happy with that, honestly.
I will say, mentioning the incident between yourself and Fabian Singer, we made the same judgment here in the commentary booth as well, which is unfortunate, but iRacing always does a very good job about simulating a lot of stuff, and occasionally just a small low coding blip will end a battle which was looking very intense between you and him, and certainly not the first time you've been involved in a battle thus far this season. Your third win, so probably feeling good about your chances into the final 3 races of this season. But I want to ask you, give your thoughts on how this season has been leading up to this point for you.
It's been sporadic because I'm not able to make all the races. Probably a half of them or so. So I mean, the drops do come in effect, but I don't think I'm any threat for any kind of points battle or anything. But I'm just been very happy that every time that I do jump in, I'm competitive with the other S2s and sometimes with some of the S1s, and had some good results because of that. So that's been great. I did want to give a shout out to Mr. Edward Buchanan because I had learned about him and his posting his setups, and I actually used his setup today, and it was really, really solid. So just want to thank him for everything he does for the Ray community, because he does a lot, and was very helpful, at least for me.
Awesome, man. Well, I was going to ask you if there's anyone you wanted to give a thanks to or a shout out, but I guess you got that squared away right off the bat. So I will ask you about Knock Hill in 1 week's time. Talk about killer curbs. That race up there in Scotland is going to be tough.
Honestly, I haven't even seen the track yet. I haven't downloaded it. I got to work on that this week, hopefully, because I am going to be able to do that next weekend. So, yeah, I guess I got to start working on that. I really don't know.
Yeah, I gotta say, honestly, my experience driving around Knock Hill is pretty much exclusively in Project Cars 2, and I remember specifically launching off some of the curbs around there. So I think I know where the jump shenanigans are going to be around there in 1 week's time. But Chris Montgomery, congratulations on the win here at the Sachsenring today, and excited to see you back out on the racetrack for the rest of the season, man. Thank you for joining us.
Appreciate it, guys. Have a great day.
And that right there was Chris Montgomery, your Spec 2 winner at the end of this 9th race of the season. And Randall, we got the janitor up there in the interview waiting area. You want to have a chat with him?
Absolutely. Jörg Manning with yet another Masters Division win. And Jörg, it looked like you had 4th place well in hand until the pit stop happened, and then found yourself back in 6th once again and involved in a heavy battle there. Tell us what it was like for you today.
My neck hurts because it goes always to the left. I felt almost like an oval track racing on an oval track. So, yeah, it was not too bad. It was not too bad. I didn't expect anything because that was the first race I ever did on Sachsenring. So, I mean, Jason, Tor and I had a really great fight, and that was really lasting to the end, and that was a great fun race.
So it looked like you spent 4 or 5 laps working your way around Tor and Jason to get that P4 back towards the end of the race, and then in one corner it all went away. what were you thinking there? Like, what more do I have to do?
I was thinking the F word. And
Yeah.
Fish sticks.
Fish sticks, exactly. Chips and crisp fish. No, I was just thinking, oh boy, that was it. But I catched them up again, and I tried everything I could until the point where Tor did a nice little crossover to the track. So he was certainly in front of us. It was quite a fun. But yeah, it was great fun. Great fun. It was. I had no chance to pause on the last lap because Jason was covering up really well, and Tor did the same thing, and we had equal speed, and so it was really tough. It was really tough, but a fantastic race.
Well, we interview you so often, Jörg, that I'm kind of running out of questions. So I'm gonna have to pull one out of the hat here. Jörg, what is your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Chocolate and vanilla.
Chocolate and vanilla. All right.
Yep.
Like
I'm a
both
chocolate
in one
boy.
bowl?
Yes, of course. I'm a chocolate boy.
Well, that is good to know. Congratulations on yet another win. And before we let you go celebrate, is there anybody you'd like to thank or shout out?
Shout out to Jason and Tor. Thank you for the fantastic race we had.
Well, there you have it right there, folks. Jörg Manny with yet another Masters Division win. The janitor cleaning things up as usual. Congratulations, Jörg. And I have a feeling we'll probably be talking to you next week.
Let's say I hope so. Let's see.
We will see indeed. That was Jörg Manny, your Masters Division winner. The janitor cleaning up yet another win here today at Sachsenring.
That he absolutely did. He has been just about faultless all throughout this season, and I like how he's underselling himself a little. Actually, I can't even say that's him underselling himself. He doesn't really need to show up for the rest of this season to seal the deal in the championship. Really, the only of the Weekend Warriors that he hasn't been like flamboyantly dominant in has been the Spec Racer Forwards, which you'll be able to catch later on this afternoon here on SMB. In about an hour's time, that broadcast is going to get started. That's going to be at Suzuka, so really looking forward to that race in about 1 hour's time. But the action does not end here at SMB. It just about never ends. In fact, not even after that, we've got the action for the XSLR series that you'll be able to catch later on this evening. Randall, I know you've got some skin in the game with the American Muscle series, which the viewers can catch every single Tuesday night here on SMB. The action simply does not stop. That gives you a reason to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on any of the racing action. But as for this broadcast here from the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors at the Sachsenring, that will just about do it. And so, for myself, Ron Maunz, Randall McGrew joining me in the commentary booth, and Guido Marzucchi doing a wonderful job working on the cameras in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and stay tuned for the Spec Racer Forwards later on this afternoon.